back in. We'll jump in. Oh, great. Wonderful. Thank you, recording in progress. Thank you to everyone who's joined us already. I know we did a lot of registrations for this, so there'll probably be people popping in as the event starts, but great to have you all here. At Mantra, we do spend a lot of time working with leaders across organizations, that are trying to navigate all sorts of type of rapid change from culture and governance. And obviously the growing role of AI is really beginning to shape how we work and some of the decisions that we make. We know we're all using it already in some form, often very practical ways, everyday ways, but very few of the organizations, certainly Mantra's working with have really taken that time and space to think about the governance and the risk and what responsible use looks like. And obviously we have the AI EU Act now. I keep saying coming down the line, but actually it's already down the line. So that's what today's conversation is about and what matters. So we're delighted to introduce Alan Thornton from Tipcan Solutions. Alan is a Tipcan, one of the partners of Mantra, and he's a lot of experience in AI governance, compliance, all the fun stuff, responsible technology, and has been working over the last couple of years with organizations to really help them understand their obligations under the EU AI Act, and more importantly, has developed a platform that will help charities and social enterprises and businesses to put kind of practical systems in place that manage compliance. I think some of the big five are charging hundreds of thousands of dollars for this work, and Alan has really taken the best bits and developed a very streamlined platform at a really cost effective price. So before I hand over to Alan, I just want to mention a very generous offer that he's made for everyone who's here today. He's, as I mentioned, his compliance platform. So he's giving us access, our Mantra community, with 30% off, which will give you 1 year's access to his platform and also a power hour directly with Alan to help you really apply all of this within your organization. Depending on the level of complexity, you might only need the 1 hour. I think that's the case for Mantra. So the value of that's about €450, but Alan is giving a discount today. So it'll be about 315 if anyone is interested. We will send a link to that in the post comms along with the slides and along with the re-recording today. And we'll also include access to the Mantra AI readiness canvas, which we've put together. So enough for me. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Alan. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Julie, and hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Hope you are all well. As Julie said, my name is Alan Thornton. I'm the founder of Tipcan Solutions and creator of the AI Compliance app. We launched last August when the transparency obligations from the EU AI Act really kicked in and started to affect roughly 7 out of the 24 million organizations in the European Union, kind of overnight. And since then, we have helped through our newsletter, speaking at events like this, and our app itself, about 3,000 organizations to date. So today we're going to look at what the Act is, how it applies to charities and SMEs, some general use cases and examples of what transparency looks like, a tiny little bit about the high risk use cases. I won't go into too much detail, it can be very intense. And then just kind of 4 simple steps that you can take today or early next week to start building out your compliance framework in a really kind of low impact way that will add a lot of value to your organization. So before we kick off, I'd like to draw your eye to a line on this opening slides just below speakers. Alan Thornton, it says graphic content supported by AI, and that is an example of a transparency notice that we will see later on in the presentation. Perfect. So the key goals for today: understand what the EU AI Act is, what the EU AI Act means for charities and SMEs, what you need to do now, how to prepare without panic, and practical proportionate compliance steps. So what is the EU AI Act? It is the world's first comprehensive AI law. It was passed in July 2024, so 18 months ago. The EU AI Act applies to all organizations and not just tech giants. So whether you use, develop, deploy, distribute AI systems in marketing, finance, HR, or any use case essentially that is public facing or will affect human beings within your organization, the regulation will impact you. And the first obligations applied from August 2nd, 2025, which is the transparency piece. The top level fine is €35 million, or 7% of global turnover, and it affects absolutely all sectors. It's not really about industry or sector, it's about AI use cases. The key goals of the Act itself are to ensure safety, transparency, and fundamental rights protection, establish mandatory requirements around artificial intelligence, and to inform users when they are interacting with AI, as well as promoting innovation. So it takes a risk-based approach to kind of figure out how to do this and how to regulate different AI systems. You can see them in the top corner there. They are unacceptable, high risk, limited risk, and minimal risk. So we will see some examples of these later in the presentation, but the unacceptable level is something like a biometric scanner. Let's say your employer deploys an AI to look at you while you work at home remotely, and it's assessing your emotions and it's making decisions based on how well you're performing and how well you're likely to perform going forward. Systems like this can be banned in the European Union since last February. So that kicked in February 2025 under the Act. So unacceptable systems cannot function in the European Union. They cannot be delivered into the European Union from outside. So anything like that would have had to leave Europe and be deployed elsewhere. High risk systems, as detailed under Annex 3, are things like LLMs or any sort of AI in finance and insurance, healthcare, the medical space. Education is another one. HR and recruitment is another key category there. Limited risk systems then are generative AI. So what everybody or most people are familiar with, your Claudes, ChatGPTs, your Google Geminis, all of these types of tools fall into the limited risk category, and they are the ones that meet the transparency obligation threshold that passed in August last year. And then minimal risk systems are things that you will find in manufacturing, like an AI that runs across the machine to let an engineer know when it may need some maintenance. I'm going to go straight into enforcement and penalties. It's the number one question that I'm asked, no matter what sector or industry that I'm talking to or dealing with, just to get it out of the way straight away. So the Act does introduce significant fines for non-compliance. It's hoping to establish a strong deterrence, it's even more severe than GDPR, which is very interesting. So already in play, I mentioned on the opening slides that the top level fine for unacceptable systems is 35 million euros. On the far right, you will see the transparency related fine, which is 7.5 million euros or 1% of global turnover. So that would be for supplying incorrect, incomplete, or misleading information to authorities. And then from August 2027, around high risk systems, that fine will increase to 15 million euros or 3% global turnover for non-compliance with requirements around the high risk systems that I just mentioned. So enforcement has already begun. A lot of people are surprised. You know, GDPR took a little bit of time to kick in, but it's not theoretical anymore. Regulators are already moving. A great example is in Ireland itself with the DPC, the Data Protection Commission. They have already begun to investigate non-EU SaaS chatbots and that fail the transparency and AI Act requirements. So they're already looking to issue fines. That started in the fourth quarter of 2025, and they are now pushing into their local jurisdictions. So you can expect people to be getting reviewed or asked for audit trails this year in the Republic of Ireland across a range of use cases. So national regulators are coordinating across the European Union, the Netherlands, France, Germany. They're all talking to each other. They're all interacting with their national AI offices. And early cases and fines will set precedents and raise expectations going forward. So I would highly recommend that people do take the EU AI Act seriously, whether you're in charity, whether you're in small business, an SME, whatever it may be. If you wait, you will come under higher scrutiny from your donors, your clients, your consumers, your vendors, your partners. You may have less negotiating power for raising funds or getting new contracts or new deals over the line. Here is a brief snapshot of the enforcement bodies in Ireland. There's a lot of them. Each of them looks after their own vertical. So, for example, the Central Bank of Ireland will look after finance and insurance, the Commission for Railway Regulation, Competition and Consumer Protection, and they all feed into the National AI Office, which is the single point of contact. Then that communicates back to the European Union's head AI office. So you can review these individual regulators when the deck is sent out. I don't want to take up too much time reading through them all, but there they are. We have 8 in total. So what does it mean for charities and SMEs? There are really 3 danger zones in 2026. And the first one is the shadow AI trap. So 56% of SMEs and charities are actually using their personal AI accounts for work data, which is incredibly bad. It really exposes organizations and can expose people's information or IP, which is obviously generally not a good thing. So if you don't have a policy, you are likely in breach of the EU AI Act already today and yesterday, and you will be tomorrow if you don't get something in place. The transparency deficit is another big danger zone people aren't aware of. So since last August, you are legally required to disclose AI use in many scenarios. So that is true for most organizations. A lot of people don't. There's a huge awareness gap around the regulations and what's required. So most organizations are actually accidental lawbreakers at the moment. There's a tiny bit of leeway, but that hammer is coming down hard in 2026. Then there's the charity trust gap. Only 12% of charities have board level AI oversight, and that's EU wide. So that is a very, very small number, and we really want to work to bring that up. That's to the benefit of the organization, the people it supports and helps, and just society at large. So we really want to get that number up from 12% and maybe flip that, get it to 88% with 12% who don't have any oversight. So for a sector built on trust, it can obviously create a major reputational vulnerability. So you wouldn't run a company without health and safety policy or GDPR register at the moment. So the EU AI Act's compliance piece needs to be built in to your thinking. So there is a reality gap. Most business leaders I talk to, organization chairs and heads, they generally say, look, we only use simple tools. We're exempt. We only have Jenny using ChatGPT and Sean is using Claude over here in the background a little bit to manage our social media accounts and our outreach. So even basic chatbots and automated screening tools, even in HR, for example, require transparency. And like me today, I use Gemini to help me with graphics, and I put that transparency notice at the very, very start because this is a public-facing talk. I have got to let people know that I didn't do everything. I was supported by AI. So there's a bit of a triple threat to SMEs and charities at the moment. They are potentially open to regulatory fines, reputational damage, which is the big one for charities, and cultural misalignment, especially if you're looking for new resourcing, you want to get new energy into the building, they want to see that you're going to operate a certain way and you're going to follow the regulations that best suit the public that you serve. Also, just a kind of side note, insurance companies are now looking for provenance and AI audit trails for renewing policies. So that's just something to be aware of that you could end up having a problem with your insurance cover if you don't have an AI compliance framework in place. So what it really means then, the transparency related requirements are covered under Articles 50 and 52. In basic terms, that means you need to inventory the AI systems and use cases that you have, set up your labeling piece like I have. So graphic content supported by AI. I then have a compliance framework in the background that says Gemini helped me create that. The label was the label you just saw. And then that gets printed into a cryptographic hash and creates an audit trail that I can produce to a regulator or a vendor or somebody who's a government agency looking for a tender documentation or something like that. So Articles 50 and 52 are kind of what passed in August last year. They cover basic generative AI systems. You need to inventory your use cases, get labels for any public facing content, have an audit trail set up with some sort of human oversight in the background. For the high risk systems, depending on the use case, almost all the articles of the Act may apply, and you'll see some examples as we go forward. Also, then is the mandatory training requirements. So this has been in place since February 2025. If you are an organization with volunteers or employees, if any of them use AI, create AI, deploy AI within your business, under Article 14, you've got to provide training to them on bias control, on ethics and values, and just understanding how AI works in general and the impact that it can have on people. So since last February 2025, organizations have been required to provide that training, regardless of whether you're a nonprofit or a business. And you can see there, again, if you want to read in more detail what is covered, Article 14 just basically means you got to train up your volunteers and your staff who are using AI. Some real world use cases. So a big one that I see, doesn't matter what type of organization it is, would be a HR assistant, which is classified as high risk under the Act. So let's say the AI ranks job candidates based on scoring criteria. this must meet the high risk requirements under the Act due to it making potential employment decisions that would affect the human being in question. There are the relevant articles beyond 50 and 52. So 6, 9, 13, 16, 17, 29, 50, and 60. So you can see that there is a large bit of compliance work required for something like this. And if you are the person who uses this system through a vendor, that's okay. You can talk to your vendor. They can supply you with documentation on what they're doing and how they're doing it. You can just track that. If you are the person who develops this tool, you will be subject to much more severe compliance requirements and may have to go into a national sandbox, which I'll talk about later. Marketing copy, I think this affects everybody. So, if you use a generative AI and LLM to build a landing page for your website or your projects, to write your emails, your outreach emails, your products, descriptions, whatever it may be, that requires a transparency notice at the first interaction. So that's what's really, really critical about Articles 50 and 52. The notice has to be there at the first point of contact. So as soon as my presentation loaded up, the notice was there. I couldn't put it at the very end, bring everybody through the presentation where it maybe missed that, AI was used, and it has to be first point of contact. And we'll see examples of where this is true in the real world from large multinational corporations and how they're doing it at the moment. But as you can see with limited risk systems, the relevant articles are much less than high risk systems. I just threw in the minimal risk manufacturing piece to set a kind of a reference point for systems that don't actually have any mandatory compliance requirements under the Act. Like I said, a maintenance system that would support a factory engineer to know when to replace a part, or a system requires an upgrade. That doesn't have any mandatory disclosure requirements, but the Act still covers them and encourages voluntary disclosures under Article 95. So even though you don't have to build in any sort of compliance framework around these use cases, it's recommended that you do. The whole goal of the Act itself is to develop best practice around artificial intelligence and to build trust out in the public, and obviously inside organizations and businesses. So it's better to track, report, and record what you're doing here and kind of push it off and say, well, maybe if we put transparency labels on our marketing content, people are going to think it's not as good. We're beyond that thought process now, and have moved into the era of regulation. So it's only going to be a net benefit going forwards to get on top of these things. The last case there, primarily for business and maybe for charities, depending on how you operate. If you have merch or content or anything that you sell and you use a dynamic pricing engine with AI, that would be high risk because it could impact fairness and consumer rights. It may have bias in there. It may produce discriminatory pricing based on information it's gathering from elsewhere. And if there's no human oversight piece there or training in place, that can really affect people's rights. So you can see the relevant articles are slightly different to what would be required under a HR assistant, even though the risk category is the same. It's still classified as high risk. So there are many applications and different relevant articles depending on the use cases you have in your business. So transparency in the real world, what is this we are looking at? This is Guess and Vogue collaborating last year. This is a physical production. This was printed. They had Guess bring some new clothing to the markets, and Vogue ran a piece with a photographer called Seraphine Valora. So you can see here that there was a label put on this content that was produced to the public across the European Union because the model in the picture is completely fake. It's a totally fake person, but the clothes are real. And the transparency obligations passed in August required this label to be there. So this is a large, multinational, huge company, well respected, well recognized, showcasing how to use a transparency label. It's right there. Yes, it might be a little bit small and they're a bit cheeky, blending it into the frame of the door, but the requirement has been met and it is visible. If you were to look at this and have it in your hands, you would see that, and most people would read it. So there's a physical, real-world example of what a transparency label looks like. Most people operate in the digital space now, so we'll look at some examples there. I've used my own labels. I think it's just the best thing to do for the digital. So the first one on the left is the landing page of my website is supported by artificial intelligence. The very first thing in the bar once you open it says page content supported by AI. Boom, transparency label is there. On my newsletter on LinkedIn, very top line of the letter itself, supported by AI, overseen by humans. So again, I'm meeting that transparency requirements everywhere that I can, and then I track those AI system use cases and labels in my internal framework. But that's what they look like. Very, very simple, non-intrusive. They don't have to dominate. They don't have to take away from what you're trying to do. But that's just very simple examples of transparency labels. In pictures, you've probably noticed on Meta products, especially Instagram, there's this new AI info thing that's popping up. So if there's any AI use, or if you've used AI, Meta strongly recommends that you tell it when you post that you've used AI, and it will then put this label onto your content, which consumers can click, and it will greet them with a message. Content in this, ad or this post was created with generative AI, and then it will tell you what generative AI is. So Meta was one of the only large generative AI developers to not sign the code of practice last year before the transparency obligations kicked in. So they technically don't completely meet the obligations of the EU AI Act, but they put in their own systems that they believe will meet the requirements for end users like charities or small businesses or whoever it may be using a Meta AI product. So they believe they've done enough, but it's just to be aware of that. They're actually one of the only large corporations that didn't sign the code of practice. And then we can see for visualizations, there's me playing a drum kit. I've never sat behind in a room. I've never been in. That was created on Google VO, but they are now watermarking all generative content with a little VO dash or a star in the bottom corner. And you'll see more of this going forward so that the larger corporations can essentially cover themselves for other individuals using their tools without delivering the transparency notices that would be required. So they're trying to bake in the watermarks. I know they can be removed, but that's only a net negative for anybody who tries to do that and is challenged going forward. So AI transparency labels are here to stay. I'm not going to say they're coming, they're here now, and you're only going to see them more and more, and it will differentiate between where AI was used as a tool to support what you were doing in a very positive way, if that's how you use it. And then content that doesn't have the labels, as time goes on, your audience, the people you deal with, the people you talk to are going to know, well, that was fully human created and this was AI generated because this one had the label, this one didn't. We can trust that organization. And that's where we are now. And that's only going to grow as we go through 2026 and into 2027, especially when the high risk piece comes in. It will be a big deal in 2027. High risk systems, I'm only going to briefly touch on this. This is incredibly dense, but just to make people aware that a high risk compliance setup can take up to 12 months to deliver, set up, and enact within your organization. It can actually take so long to set up and potentially, depending on your product and your use case, be so burdensome that the United States was actually successful in putting pressure on the European Union in November last year to push the deadline out from August 2026 to August 2027. Because it can take a team of 3 people working up to 60 weeks, 2 days a week to get this done. And that's, there's a lot going on. So outside of just building out your AI systems, putting your transparency labels in there, having your audit trail set up, you need to have detailed incident report plans. You need to tie in with GDPR because the EU AI Act almost supersedes GDPR. It kind of sucks it in. So that's something to be aware of, especially if you're a charity. If you work with DPOs, ask them about this and put pressure on them about this. I had DPOs last year, prominent ones as well, tell me that this was not an issue. This is seriously an issue. So, so press your DPOs, get your DPIAs updated, and work with the people you work with to get that sorted. You need detailed oversight procedures from the human perspective. If you're going to train people in bias and understanding how AIs work, you need to then have a procedure that needs to be followed that says not only are they trained, but everybody actually knows what's going on. So these are 6 of the actual 12 steps that you would need to take to get a high risk system fully compliance under the EU AI Act. As I said, it can take a long time. Quality management systems down there, bottom left, can take up to 6 weeks to get that documentation completely in order, even when you use a tool like mine, to speed things along. So it's just to be aware that if you are going to go into HR tooling, financial tooling, educational tooling, any sort of AI that touches human data, you will potentially fall into high risk. And You will have to build out this process, but before that, you'll go into what's called the national sandbox. And the sandbox is essentially a playground for generative AI and AI tools where you can kind of build and work with data in a safe space that doesn't have any way or function to be publicly accessible. So it's like a free space to operate in where you don't need to meet compliance requirements before. Every nation, all 27 nation states in the European Union have a national sandbox, and anybody building a product needs to go into that if they're high risk and then build out this compliance piece afterwards. So it's quite intense. And like I said, the US were successful in pushing out the deadline for that to August 2027. Key articles I didn't mention, which are very, very important for charities and businesses. Article 77, which is about whistleblowers. So organizations must establish secure channels and protections to enable employees and others to report breaches of the EU AI Act without fear of retaliation. So that is mandatory from Q1 2026. Slightly vague, but essentially you've got 25 days to get that channel set up and to be rocking from the 1st of April within your organization. The next very important one is Article 73, which is about serious incident reporting. So you've got 72 hours to report any serious incidents related to artificial intelligence within your organization through the relevant portal or national portal. And that must be done. It's an obligation. You'll be severely fined if an incident takes place and you don't report it. So a great example would be food delivery company in the Italian region that was found to have a black box system that discriminated against over 40s delivery drivers who requested holidays. So it would discriminate against those guys, and the company couldn't tell anyone why this was happening. They didn't build in that, if people request holidays, we should give them less work because they're not as hard working, yada, yada, yada. So that was essentially taking away people's right to, equal employment opportunities within a business and fairness within a business. So that is an example of a case that would definitely be required to report. Once they found out that's happening, they'd have to get that in within 3 days, and they might be okay from a fine perspective. But that's a really, really good example. It happened pre-EU AI Act from about 3 years ago. That company was fined 200 million euros for that black box system that they couldn't explain why it was discriminating against those drivers. So quick wins, what can you start, this week or early next week? A great place to start is to run a 30-minute AI inventory workshop with your team. Ask everybody, what systems are you using? What systems are we using? What content do we produce through these systems that's public facing? And that could even be, an internal stakeholder meeting or presentation. If you're going to use AI there, you stick a label on that. And that's still technically public facing piece of work. Add an AI use question into your vendor due diligence and the people you work with. Ask them, do you guys have a compliance framework in place? What systems are you using? Do you provide me with services or products that have AI built in that I'm not aware of? Do I need to put a label on that? Are you guys delivering it with a label? Very important, especially for marketing and advertising companies. And then obviously insurance ties into that, which is kind of add that AI use question into vendor due diligence. It's already popping up in e-tenders at the moment. Draft an AI transparency notice for your website or your chatbots. So that can be very simple. If you use AI internally, you can draft one up that will work. You can just stick onto the end of your website or whatever it may be, or your chatbot, and nominate an AI compliance lead in your business. So depending on your use cases, you could only be using LLMs like ChatGPT for email responses, Gemini for graphics. If that's the case, you don't need a solicitor, professional, legal AI compliance lead. You just need somebody to sit in, manage the use cases, and build out the audit trails. That's it. And you'll be able to produce that to anybody who comes looking if your questions or something wants to come up. So AI compliance is here to stay. The EU AI Act is leading the way and becoming the baseline for standards across the entire planet. Just 3 days ago, Vietnam, where I am at the moment, enacted its EU AI Act copy law, essentially. They've produced an 85% carbon copy of the EU AI Act, and you can see the similarities here later when we share the deck. But the Act itself will be used as a baseline across regions, across the planet. You'll probably only see challenges from America, China, bigger nations like this, India maybe, but expect more places like Vietnam to pop up using the same frameworks and the same structures. And Vietnam has been far more harsh with this than the European Union. They have provided a 12 to 18 months kind of runway, but they have enacted the law as of the 1st of March. And you must deliver high risk systems, for example, to the Ministry of Science and Technology for review before you deploy, which is very, very severe on people. It's not the same in Europe. You get to deploy and then kind of talk to them, but in Vietnam, it's different. But you can see that the EU AI Act is being used as a base kind of across the world. This will be the first of many. So key takeaways, compliance is a competitive advantage nowadays in 2026. Trust is your most valuable assets. Being EU AI Act ready isn't just about, avoiding fines. It's about proving to your donors and clients, your customers, that you're a safe pair of hands. And then obviously impact over overhead. So compliance shouldn't drain your budgets, no matter what type of organization you are. Use tools like the AI Readiness Canvas or my own product, AI-compliance.app, to be proportionate. You don't need to build a fortress when you just need a fence. And for most use cases, a fence will do. You don't need the castle on top. So how we govern AI today defines our culture tomorrow. So let's lead with responsibility. And I do want to thank Mantra for inviting me to open the impact culture sessions with this talk. I believe it will be the culture issue of 2026. Regulation is going to be everywhere. You won't be able to get away from it. It's going to go from never heard from it to I'm hearing about it too much. That's what's about to happen. So the app itself, you can get it there, AIcompliance.app. Tiny bit about the product. I don't want to be salesy, but we build out use cases and audit trails within 30 minutes of setup. We've got infinite team member seats for the EU AI Act Training Center. So if you sign up and you've got 10 members who use AI and need to be trained on it, you can add them to the system, get their training done, all included in the price. And then the audit trail for their training is built in as well. There's over 20 templates for your SOPs, your policies, your DPIAs. So if you've got a DPO and they're being resistant, you can plow out some templates here and use them. And then it's got the one-click AI cards and provenance for vendors, contracts, and insurers. It's all super, super simple. Couldn't be any easier. It's industry agnostic. There's a drop-down menu. You can see there all the industries we service. The tool itself will tweak to the industry that you pick or the sector that you pick, and then the use cases you put in, it will map directly to the EU AI Act article and tell you what you need to do and what you don't need to do. So super, super handy. And then as Judy mentioned, if you use code mantra30 on the power hour, you'll get 30% off. And that will get you set up and good to go. So I think that's everything from me.
Amazing, Alan. Thank you so much. God, is everyone shaking in their boots with fear of what's coming down the line? And my first call with Alan, I nearly needed a stiff drink at the other end. But that app is incredible. We're actually going to be a bit of a guinea pig and go through the process at Mantra to see what's involved. We have a couple of questions. I'll just pop into the ones in the chat. So Maggie has asked if staff use AI, not a personal one, but just general, to review emails, should it be added into the staff signature?
No,
No. Okay, nice
no.
answer. Good, nice and simple. We'd like that. Do you have any, does that answer Maggie, or do you have anything else you wanted to ask?
It's just more like in general, like we don't deliberately use AI, but like, make the mail more clear, better language, and then, it is reviewed by AI, but it's
Yeah,
still the
Yeah,
staff will read again before pasting and sending the email. So
sure.
that's use of
so
AI.
yeah, to elaborate on that, the transparency label would not be required, but the internal AI system use case and audit trail would be needed. So you have to say that, look, we use Gemini in Google Workspace to help us clean up emails to respond, and we've been doing that since the 4th of March. And Maggie is responsible for this use case. Boom, create your audit trail, done. And then if that ever changes, you update it. If not, you just leave it. Run.
Right,
Brilliant.
lovely.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, go ahead, Maggie. I have a few
Thank
minutes.
you. So like let's say we use CRM, and I know you said the some of is the vendor and some it's the organization. Um, what is AI, consider AI. So we have automated flow that looks after anonymization. Is that considered AI or?
If potentially. So a great example here would be Apollo. I don't know if you know this CRM or lead scraping tool, but Apollo essentially pulls information from all over the internet, LinkedIn, public posts, business posts, to get emails, phone numbers, all of this type of stuff. And then they add in a lovely little line that says, we're not responsible for how you use this content, but they use an AI to create the content, right? So technically, if I was advising a company like yours, if you have HubSpots, Apollo, whatever it may be, sticking a line like that into the SLA for you, I would probably look elsewhere. And this is where I talk about trust and putting pressure on vendors. So similar to the sustainability piece, where Tesco are asking every farmer how they're making the cheese, do they have a sustainability plan? The flip is going to happen now, where you have smaller companies and organizations asking people like HubSpot and Apollo, what are you guys doing for AI compliance, and how can I, be secure using your service and your systems, especially if I'm a charity,
Mm.
So I'd be asking the question for sure. It's a gray area. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, Karen, that sort of relates to your question a bit. Karen said the vendor piece here is very interesting. Would love to know more. For example, what would you need to know exactly from your CRO provider? What is their responsibility versus what is yours?
Yeah, so if they have anything happening within the product that is making decisions on people or potentially getting data on people that may not be public facing and you don't know that, and then you go and use it, you would be there's a crossover there between GDPR and the AI Act. So it's thinking with your GDPR cap on and applying AI to it, because there will now be an additional compliance question, which is basically, are you GDPR compliant? And if you're using an AI system in there, how's that working? Do you have a notice on this? Do you have a public forward facing piece of information that I can read to make sure that we're safe using your system? Because if not, I'm just going to use somebody else. And that's my advice all the time, is if they
Yeah,
can't
pressure
provide it, yeah, is just go somewhere else.
is too risky as well. And Marcus, do you want to jump in with your question? I have your hand up.
Yeah, I two, but they're kind of connected. Um, so, and it's kind of about labeling in a way. Okay, so like we use Amazon Connect. We've just started using it. Okay, when a call is recorded, and like I mean, Zoom, this recorded Zoom's going to use AI, right, to create a transcript. I didn't see an AI
Yep.
transcript at the start of the call, or AI labeling or going like, "Hey, did it?" So I guess that's kind of where my question is. Like the AI transcribes the call and does an AI summary and some other stuff. So I mean, like, do we need to have that as part? Because we do say like, GDPR, this call will be recorded, stuff like that. But like, do you need to add an additional in there to be in compliance? I
No, you
don't.
don't have to add an additional piece there. If that's what you're doing from the beginning, well, then that's okay. But that will be recorded in the AI compliance framework on the back end
So
as
I
well
don't
as
need to.
the
So I don't
GDPR.
need to inform the public that the AI will be used on their recording.
No, because you're already basically saying it. Yeah.
How am I basically saying it? I'm only saying it's being
Did
recorded.
you? So it's being recorded is the same as AI, right? AI is implicitly included in recording when you look at the act itself,
Is
because
it?
we're
Okay.
actually, yes, we're actually as well about to step into a world where if you're just in front of a camera, that's just going to be the way it is.
Okay.
Right? That's yeah, but yes, you don't need to say
So it's
anything
like
else.
you should have just known. Okay.
Yes, yes, yes,
All
yes.
right.
But you will
Cool.
be recording that in the background. Yeah,
We'll have to create some kind of log. Okay.
yes.
And then, sorry, very simple, silly. I guess it's silly, and if you use AI to generate an image or something, you have to label it, right?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah.
You're in Excel, you ask Copilot for a formula that assists you generating like a final out a number, a statistic or whatever. Do I have to label that in a public report that like the AI helped me generate a formula, or like whoever did it, or where is
The beginning and end.
yeah, Do you know what I mean? Because that's kind of like
Yes.
the emails, do you know?
Yes, exactly. So I'll give you an example even from myself. You saw the label on my website which says page supported by artificial intelligence. I'd say
Yeah.
5% of that page is delivered by artificial intelligence, but the label is
Okay.
required. So that output document will need to say, you know, it was Marcus Campbell supported by AI.
Okay.
So not on the down to the granular. It just you're sort of covered with
Yeah.
the broad
Just
Yes.
strokes.
gen. Okay.
Great, lovely.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks, Marcus. So Jessica just wants to know, do you have a non-profit rate in general? I think I can answer that. The power hour is only sort of one off, is that right? And then it's 99 a year.
That's correct, yes. So the subscription for the tool is €99 a year. The power hour is 350 generally. You know, it's discounted now. But once you've done a power hour and sign up, it's €99 a year.
Yeah, depends
If
on
you
your
go
user
to go
basis.
go 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 to your solicitor for this and they'll charge you 3 grand a document.
Yeah, I think Alan gave me an example of, I won't name the company, but they were doing it with a big brand. And what was it, 300,000 or something like that?
Yeah, there's two great examples. So one is one of the big five who shall remain nameless, charged €250,000 for a report produced by AI that they never said was produced by AI, and then had to give the money back once it got found out. And another was a self-driving car company who had to pay €300,000 for AI compliance in the European Union, where they could have used my software for the power hour or 99 quid if they could do it themselves, and get 95% of it. So they could have saved,
Incredible,
you know,
incredible. Well, thank you on
two
behalf of all of
salaries.
us.
So,
Frank wants to know if anyone, we're finished at 1:15, so if you do still have a question and you want to stay on, absolutely no problem, as long as Alan's happy to stay. But I
yeah,
understand if anyone has to jump off, and we will, as I said, send the notes out and the deck and the recording. Frank said, brilliant talk. Well done, Alan. How prepared have you seen any large organizations you deal with? Are there legal departments all over it, or are they at panic stations? And what solutions do you have for them?
yeah. So about 6% of large corporations across the European Union, just to give you a broad stroke statistic, are aware of the EU AI Act and have any sort of compliance piece in place. So we actually are working with boutique law houses across the 27 member states to deliver this product as part of the framework, not only to bring the cost down for large corporations, but also to take away the panic and the burden, because that's the kind of key goal for me, is to embed compliance in without it being a huge headache, no matter what size the organization is. So I have the process is generally, I kind of know about that dismissal. Oh, someone else has told me about it. Oh, we need this. Oh, how much is it? What? Can we use your stuff? Yeah, great. And that's kind of how the process goes with large corporates. So it's the 7 phases of panic and acceptance, similar to grief, I suppose.
Right, brilliant. Who's next? Maria. Maria's asked, what about non-declaration of AI use from within the team? Example, a colleague uses AI personal account but may not disclose that they use it. I'm assuming a robust AI policy would cover this.
Yes, 100%. If that's what's happening, you are exposed. You are severely exposed. You'll have to sit down and ask people to be honest and create a space where they're able to be honest, because a lot of people obviously hide their AI use. And then if some people are using personal accounts and inputting strategy documents or IP documents or whatever it may be, you know, you get a spreadsheet from somebody full of emails and phone numbers, and you pump that into ChatGPT and ask it something on your personal accounts. It's so bad. Like it's so bad. If there was any fail points there, your organization is done. There'd
Yeah.
be no coming back from that.
No, absolutely. I know early in the piece mantra put in mantra AI in place, just that we were kind of covering those bases because obviously with client work and that, so it's locked down, it doesn't get sourced out to the world. Kara's asked, thanks for the talk, very helpful. How is compliance going to be monitored in practical terms? I know you mentioned the various bodies who are overseeing it, but what will the requirements be? Example, are there particular reports required? Will there be audits, etc.?
Yes, so there will be audits. There'll be random audits similar to revenue. There won't be a date at the end of the year where you have to submit your logs or your audits yet. That may come in the future, but
Sure.
the pressure point is really on building trust, supply chains, putting pressure on vendors and contracts, and insurance companies. Insurance companies are really going to drive the change here. Companies won't get insured without a compliance framework in place by the end of this year. So like you're just going to have to bake it in to what you're doing. There'll be no avoiding it. And I suppose there's no enforcement where, someone's scanning it and looking over you like revenue, but you'll get caught out. Someone can make a complaint against your organization, and all of a sudden you do have the auditor at your door, and and you know system. And there's a compliance debt piece here I should have touched on. I know a few people have left, so apologies, but you are expected to backdate the tracking of your AI uses.
Yeah.
So like that's really, really important. If you put this off for another year, you've just got another 12 months of problems to sift through. So,
From the time you
but
started using it.
yeah. From the deadline of when it kicked in, the 2nd of August,
Okay.
2025.
It'll be a fun summer.
Yeah.
Tanya wants to know, thinking about formatting, if you generate or write your own content but use AI to tidy it up, how would you disclose that?
So the supported by AI is a fantastic label,
Yeah.
and it's amazingly generally vague. And that is what I would go with, especially if you are only using it for small things. So when you saw the Guess and Vogue collaboration, it
Mm.
said the photographer made on AI. So that's very different to supported by AI. So essentially, this photographer went in and the AI did the heavy lifting, right? That's what you would get from that label. So supported by AI, fantastic. You've used AI, light touch, no problem.
Yeah.
On AI, with AI, or produced by AI, if you've literally got AI to do everything and you are just the input, they're going to be the labels that you'll need. So wording will be very important, but the labels will remain very short.
Very short. And there's a good lead into the next one. What about grant writing? There was a comment earlier about, would this turn donors or funders off if you're using AI to help you put your grant applications together, which I know many of us are. What's your
So that's not going to put off donors and people who may put money into your organization. Where the risk lies is not having the compliance framework to track the AI usage, which could become a problem through a complaint or an audit in the future. And if if a charity was today to fall under an audit for AI compliance and fail it, do you think that they would be getting loads of donations?
Yeah, fair
I don't
enough.
think so.
So,
So
and I
that's where the
think
risk is. Yeah,
as soon as we're all doing it, I think they'll, it's, I think because we're still in the Wild West, you feel you're not doing the right thing using it, but actually once everyone's using it, it'll be a distinctive that you're not. Clodagh has a rather complicated question. I don't know,
sure.
I'll ask it, Clodagh, and if you want to jump in. So our charity is a limited company and an NFP in Ireland. However, our Microsoft 365 system with basic AI is supplied by our US office. Is it down to the Ireland team or the US team who are responsible for this? Tricky.
Yeah, no problems. So that's actually a straightforward question. So AI being delivered into the European Union, it is on yourselves to have a local track set up. It would be great if the US office also had something in place, which was basically a mirror of that framework. So they understand, they may not fall under any obligations or be at risk of fine themselves, but at least they know what they're providing to you. You have confidence in what you've been provided, and you can stand up and say, well, on our side, we're compliant and our framework works. So it's not a big scary beast. Like for example, if you were to take that use case to me on a power hour, I could input it in there. You could understand how that works literally in 30 minutes. And then you could go off for the rest of the year and be compliant if somebody was to come and audit you based on that use case. It's that simple if you want it to be. It's yeah.
Brilliant. Which is the peace of mind piece. I think that was all the questions in the comments. Is there any final questions from anybody in the virtual audience powered by AI? No, thank you. Lots of thanks. Alan, thank you so much. I know this is a big kind of scary thing for a lot of us. We're all sort of learning as we go. So to know that there's somebody like you who knows all the bits, and that platform sounds fantastic. As Alan said, we will do a 30% discount using that code Mantra30. It's valued at about €450, and we'll get it through this link for 315, I think, or thereabouts. And then
Correct.
it's €99 a year. So it really is a steal. And I know it'll tick an awful lot of boxes. Clodagh, did you pop your hand back up again? Nope, all good. Excellent. So thank you, Alan. We'll send everything out. So it's probably a webinar you might want to share with your teams. Make sure everybody is across it. That'll go out by tomorrow. And as always, if there's anything Mantra can do to assist you in this, just get in touch. So thank you all for joining and have a great day. Lovely. And thanks, Alan.
Thank you. No problem.
Well, thanks, everyone. Great. And I will stop recording. Oh, you might have to stop recording, Alan.
Yeah, I was looking for it.
Oh, you
I
can't
can
see it,
stop.
can you not, down the
I
bottom?
can see you are recording.
Let's
Maybe
see.
if I stop
West
share the screen.
host.
There we go.
Ah, well, we won't carry on talking because we're still recording. But I'll touch base with you a little bit later.